Welcome to Season 3 of Coming Home to Ourselves, where we aim to bridge the gap between the sacred and modern day responsibilities, complex chronic illness, and life. I am your host, Denise Elysa, practitioner and teacher, and I aim to empower you to become your own self-healer and an embodied co-creator. I am not a medical professional, and nothing said in this podcast should be misconstrued as medical advice or replacement of such. To learn more about my philosophies or practices, visit DeniseElysa.com. Hi, friends. I'm so glad that you're here. Today, we have Sharon Pendlington, who is a certified hormone health and stress resilience coach with a decade of clinical experience helping women navigate the menopause transition. She believes that with the current menopause conversations being heavily focused on HRT, this bypasses the opportunity for the wisdom that can be accessed within this transitional time. So Sharon, thank you for being here. And I'm really looking forward to having this conversation around the menopause transition from such a different and more empowered lens.
Thank you. Yes, I invite the conversation for sure. So, yeah, I mean, for one, it's Western culture mainly that views menopause as problematic, right? And there are many other cultures that it's actually a time of wisdom and empowerment and honor to be postmenopausal.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
And also that many women go through the menopause transition without any complaints. We tend to hear just about the problems that can happen in the menopause transition. And this is a medical perspective too that doesn't isn't relegated just to menopause for sure, where we focus on what's wrong rather than what is right.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Hmm.
was just going to say that, like, that medical lens of things is so frequently off base, or, on the one hand, it can be quite helpful and sometimes necessary to have that medical lens come into whatever it is we're navigating. But there is so much depth and wisdom in our body's natural cycles and processes that get missed and misdiagnosed. And, you know, one of the common things that I've seen it a lot throughout my career and my life as well, but it's something that I'm witnessing being spoken about a little bit more recently as well, is how often we diagnose something as a disorder when really it's a response, a very natural response to the circumstances that we are living in, or to the cycles that our body is transitioning through, whatever it may be. And it's such an interesting reframe, I find, to explore that through that lens of this being a really natural response that has so much depth and wisdom available to you within it.
Thank you. Yeah. So these are natural hormone changes that happen in the menopause transition. And we're going to have responses to those. Some of us respond more strongly than others. Some of us are more sensitive to these changes, for instance. We all come with our unique set of circumstances and background, and nervous system capability as well. And
Mm-hmm.
so these are, of course, natural changes. And I love that you stated around the recognition that these are messages. So we can
Yeah,
learn from this, right? Let's say we're not sleeping, or we have the brain fog, we're forgetting words. Can this just be a message for us? To me, this is the most empowering part of menopause, is when actually we have some symptoms that, and just like with any other thing in life, these can be signals from our body that we can choose to listen to.
absolutely. I agree. I love that being brought into this conversation. Thank you, because that's such a massive piece of the work that I do with people, like one on one, but also within my community, is helping them recognize, is this symptom something that genuinely needs medical attention? Or is this a symptom where your body is trying to communicate something to you, and you can actually learn so much from connecting with your body in that way and from adapting. And then the other piece is really recognizing that symptoms can be signs of healing in some situations. From an energetic and also a somatic, like emotional repression perspective, heat is often related to repressed anger. Women reach the stage of menopause and they go, actually, like, fuck it. I don't need to live for all of these other people. I can start to live for me. When you start to heal different aspects within yourself, so let's say you've set a new boundary that maybe you needed to set a long time ago. Well, that begins to heal something in you. And that unprocessed, incomplete stress response that has been still living in your system because it did not have a chance to complete itself begins to complete a little bit further.
Yeah, well, I love the way that you explained that and absolutely resonates with me, but I've never had it explained in that particular way. When I think, and you know, for me, if we're talking about hot flashes, night sweats, that heat, same thing. It's an incomplete stress response. And so it comes back to the nervous system and comes
Yeah.
back to our stress response. So, you know, hot flashes, most of us don't think about it as a neurological complaint, right? We're like, how is heat related to our nervous system or a stress response? But, you know, part of that fight or flight response is to, you know, our adrenals secrete cortisol. That cortisol raises our blood pressure, raises our heart rate, gives energy to our limbs, raises our blood sugar, also that we can fight or flee. And if we have not had that opportunity to kind of complete that stress response, it can show up, right? And as a way of
Mm-hmm.
healing, as a way of moving that through. Like if we look at wild animals, you know, if a wild animal is outrunning a predator, immediately afterward it shakes it off. It shakes off, it completes that stress response. We don't, right? We kind of push
Exactly.
it down, push it down.
Exactly. This is not societally acceptable. Like, you should see me though. Like, I will literally just go to my kitchen and start like shaking it off, shake it out. We have a rebounder in our living room. Like, I'll just go jump and like jump it out. You know, those stress responses have to come out somehow.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I love that you mentioned as well just how I find the same thing when I work with clients. They're often having insights around, wow, I've been prioritizing other people even at my own expense, and they're done with it, right? I think menopause transition is the you know the time of the highest divorce rate too, right? Because we're just at this is why it's so empowering. We're at this point where we're like, no, I'm done with that. I don't want to carry this with me anymore. I'm ready
Yeah.
to let this go. The
Yeah.
prioritizing other people, the perfectionism, the constant to-do list, like the expectations we have of ourselves, the self-judgment, the self-criticism that's so common. Often this is the first time I will hear women be kind to themselves. It's a
Ugh.
whole learning. No one's ever taught us this.
Well, and it's an unlearning because you know what we have been taught to not be nice to ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We're unraveling a lot. Like you mentioned, Denise, we're carrying, you know, something has been modeled to us or verbally told to us, often by a caregiver at our younger age. And we sometimes integrate that as a belief. And we're so busy and we have so much stress. We just keep carrying that with us. This is the way I cope. For me, it was control that kept me from sleeping for 20 years. That was a coping tool that worked very well in a very chaotic childhood. I just kept it with me till my 50s. But it was keeping me awake because I was trying to control everything in the middle of the night. I would think about what could I have done better during the day? What can I plan out for tomorrow so that everyone's lined up exactly where they need to be so I can feel safe. Um,
Exactly. That's so
mhm.
common. Thank you for sharing that because that is a very common like maladaptive survival mechanism that many of us take on really early in childhood, especially as you highlighted in more chaotic homes. That's incredibly common.
And especially, part of this is beliefs we have around worthiness. Part of it is beliefs we might have around our power, right? Either we have wanted to control because we're in a place where we don't have a lot of power and we want to belong, even just that wanting to belong. I find it, especially in healthcare, we give our power away very quickly, right? We have our own inner wisdom, but it's so much easier to ask somebody else, what's wrong with me? What should I do? Right? So many of us are so unfamiliar with what's happening in our bodies. We're so out of touch with it that it's another reason to give that authority to somebody else. Like, I don't know anything about my body. I don't know. I haven't paid attention. I've been up here all the time, right?
That's right.
So it's easy to give away.
Absolutely. I want to go back to something that you said right in the beginning of this conversation, and it was around how in Western society, we don't have a whole lot of respect for this menopausal transition, but in other societies, it's actually revered as more of this time of wisdom. And, the woman is transitioning to this point where she's now like a wisdom keeper, where somebody would go to her for advice and for wisdom, versus here where we start to almost like look down on people societally when they hit that phase and, oh, women are just crazy. There's a lot of that gaslighting that comes in when a woman transitions into menopause as well.
Yeah, I mean, what's one I'm work with a practitioner that's a traditional Chinese medicine practitioner, and in their philosophy is that when your energy moves from your reproductive organs in menopause and up to the heart, and so you're a vessel for kindness for other people and become the matriarch of your society. And I mean, they added that you're meant to look after other people. I don't know how I feel about that part, but I do really love the part about self-kindness, and not just for other people, but for ourselves.
I love that. Oh, that's beautiful. So, what does it mean to you when you say that the HRT conversation really bypasses a lot of the wisdom in this transition?
So I'm just a little bit concerned that it will eventually become, just like a birth control pill that gets overprescribed for, you know, anything, that we may have actual control over ourselves, right? And like,
Mhm.
as an example, so what else? It's not just HRTs. HRT can be very helpful. I mean, I take HRT. And I think if every woman can have a conversation about it with their physician, even to work preventatively with bone health and cognition and cardiovascular health, I think it's worth the conversation for everyone. But many women cannot take HRT or choose not to. Many women find they don't tolerate it, like they don't find it helpful, and they actually feel worse on it. And many
Mhm.
women take it and then they feel better, and then their symptoms come back because they haven't addressed the foundational pieces. So if we're not addressing, I just feel like it's this missed opportunity. So why aren't you sleeping? Like for me, if I had not discovered, this is control, and I kept noticing the pattern. There's control again. There's control again. This is a pattern. Is this even serving me anymore? That I could let it go. And it changed. It didn't just change my sleep. It changed my relationships. It changed the way I interacted with people. It changed my profession. Like addressing one thing can be so powerful. And we can just skip by that empowering piece and decide to take medication, right? I just feel
Right.
like we're missing part of the conversation. Like it's not just about replacing those hormones, but what else are these messages telling us? What are we
Yeah.
missing by not tuning in, by
Yeah. And what are we
continuing to give our
suppressing?
wisdom? Yes. I love that perspective, Denise. Hadn't even thought about what we might be, well, continuing to suppress
Yeah,
too.
absolutely.
It's like this missed opportunity for inner wisdom.
Mhm.
And what I will say is, it I needed support to make that happen. Like, it required
Oh,
a very safe container and some self-kindness to even be aware of that. I think that's why
yeah,
identifying perfectionism is such a challenge, because we want to be perfect. We don't want to see. We don't want to see
yeah,
perfectionism.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
that's why the work you do in groups, I find, or even one to one, like, we all need support with this. We were never taught it. Like, I feel like I'm very privileged to have had a mentor that, I worked on this. This wasn't overnight. This was over a couple years, right? Um, yeah, just that it's such a privilege to have that support and have that container of safety to be able to explore at our own capacity, right?
Yeah,
Because we don't want to negate self-kindness through all this. We're
yeah.
That's a really important piece, is the self-kindness.
And do you find as well, when like in yourself or others, when you start to identify these like perfectionistic parts? I don't know if you're familiar with parts work, but I bring it in through parts work. So if you start to identify these perfectionistic parts, um, we often like want to be perfect in how we fix it too. And I'm
Mhm.
hesitant to even use the word fix because I don't believe that we are like fixing. I don't believe that we were broken in the first place. Like I said, these are all survival mechanisms that are a very natural part of being human. We all have them, right? They might look different, they might come out different, the parts themselves might be different, but every single one of us has them. And so for perfectionistic people who struggle with that, I have found that when it comes to the actual healing process and how they start to unpack this, that perfectionistic part even starts to show up in that. Like, if I can just control how I unpack this, if I can make sure that I do the right practice at the right time every single day, then I'm going to do this in the perfect way and then I'm going to be healed.
Right. Yeah. And this is often something that isn't in our consciousness either. And
Oh, yeah.
sometimes
No, for sure.
it can be helpful when someone can help you identify it. I
Yeah.
work with people all the time. They're like, yeah, I do everything. I don't drink coffee. I don't drink alcohol. I do my exercise. I eat 150 grams of protein. They list off all the things they're doing. And right away, I'm like, is that part of the problem?
Exactly.
That we're not okay unless we're doing
Yeah,
everything perfectly.
that's right.
But it can be really very easily be missed.
Hmm.
Yeah. And for me, part of it was naming, and this is ongoing. Just because I'm aware of it now doesn't mean it completely disappeared. But now I can hold it with some kindness. And when I
Yes.
notice perfectionism coming up, like especially like a new business owner, it's like, yeah, you want to do everything right. So many reasons to be overdoing. I just remind myself, who does this belong to? Does this perfectionism belong to you? And I remember, no, this doesn't belong to me. I don't need to keep holding this in this moment.
That's beautiful. Now, I know that you want to bring an embodiment practice into our session today. Your embodiment
Sure.
practice weaves in a lot with your conversation around the nervous system impact in menopause. One of the things that was coming to me during that practice, which, by the way, is so nice to be on the receiving end of, was just the deep reverence that you have for women when they're going through this menopausal transition, and how that reverence comes through in your work and in what you just offered, and in having such an honoring perspective of the menopause transition for women. So thank you for that.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, I've
Mhm.
heard, I mean, I've been working with women in this phase for a decade, and I often, I've talked to hundreds and hundreds of women when they, embark on exploring how to work with this, how to meet this life stage. And so I have the privilege of hearing what's happening. And there's a spectrum, of course. And then I get to see where they are afterward and just how much can change with the support that's available. Yeah. So I'm very,
Mhm.
and of course, having moved through this transition myself and really
Mhm.
struggled through it. um, yeah.
Is that what brought you into the work, you going through it yourself?
I would probably say yes. Yeah,
Mhm.
my symptoms kind of started mid 30s,
Mhm.
shortly after my second child. And this can be really common too, where, we may have children a little bit later in life and we're moving from having our children and that depletion into, we're expected to deal with all these hormone changes as well. There's a lot on us. And so for me, it was mood changes or periods of rage that I was like, well, where did that come from? And so I started looking for answers. And then the sleep issues, not sleeping for 20 minutes a night for many years, just running on cortisol, getting my energy from cortisol, which, you know, I used to talk about this when I was in the middle of it as, yeah, I'm still functioning. Yeah, I only sleep 20 minutes a night. Almost almost like it was something to be proud of. Like,
Yeah,
look how
like a
much I
badge of
can put
honor.
up with, right?
Yeah.
Which, looking back, it almost feels shameful, right? That
Mhm.
you denied yourself for 20 years, right? And you allowed other people to be okay with it. I was teaching yoga at the time, was one of my professions, and one of the other instructors had said to me, "Oh, I'm taking a week off." And I said, "Oh, where are you going? Are you going on holiday?" She said, "No, I haven't been sleeping well the last couple of days, and so I'm going to take a week off and really really focus on that." And I was stunned. I'm like, I haven't slept in 18 years. But it was a real revelation to me. Like, oh, this is what self-care looks like. This is
Yes.
truly what prioritizing your sleep looks like. Yeah, it might mean taking a break from work, right? That had not even crossed my mind. What hadn't even considered something like that.
If I can reflect it back to you, like we again, it goes so far, so deep into our conditioning. This is one of the things that I see showing up in people who are like heavy workaholics, like wearing that badge of honor, wearing like their exhaustion, their like how much they do, how productive they are, how little they sleep, all of these pieces as like a badge of honor because internally it's feeding into their self-worth because they don't feel worthy if they are not working. And this is coming from a full-blown recovering, actively ongoing recovering workaholic. You
Right?
have a
This
little
work
bit further to
never
go.
ends. Never ends. It's not check done. I'm done with
Yeah.
that. Yeah. Well, let's celebrate that, right? Because that's huge.
Yeah. Yeah. But for you as
Mhm.
well, with wearing the badge of honor of like no sleep, that's why I wanted to reflect that back to you because it's such a common thing. Because the way that you said it was looking back, it almost feels shameful that you were wearing this badge of honor of not sleeping, that you were allowing other people to normalize it, you were normalizing it. And you know what? Like society normalizes it. We are taught that we are expected to normalize it.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's so ingrained. Like, I think those were the words that you used. This is a lot of conditioning, decades of conditioning.
So, how does all of this show up in our experience of menopause, and how does our nervous system impact our experience of menopause?
Hmm. So, I think we forget that the nervous system regulates our hormones. So we've probably had, if you're born with ovaries, you've had the experience of certain times of the month when you're menstruating where you notice, oh, I can't think as well. I'm really tired. My mood is changing, often the week before your period, or sometimes just that day right before you ovulate. And different, that can be a whole spectrum of things, but it affects us physically, mentally, emotionally, those changes in hormones. And so we know that stress affects ovarian production of hormones, that through that HPO axis, hypothalamus, pituitary, that, neurotransmitter, hormonal, nervous system regulation, where, women might stop getting a period if they've had a really stressful time, for instance, right? Or their periods become irregular. So we know it's a thing, and the medical system has started talking about it when we're menstruating, and somehow no one's talking about the same thing happening with the same hormone changes in perimenopause. But our adrenal glands are meant to make some of our hormones for us as our ovarian production declines. So our adrenal glands make DHEA, which gets converted into estrogen and testosterone. It's like this backup hormone system that we have, but only if we're not trying to make stress hormones instead. The adrenals will always
Hmm.
produce cortisol instead of our reproductive hormones. Cortisol is a survival hormone. If you're going to get
That's what
eaten
I was
by a
just going to say.
tiger, you don't care about your reproductive hormones. You just got to get
Hmm.
out of there.
Hmm.
Um, so often, and this is, working with hundreds of patients, there's been two patients, I think, in my decade where their adrenal function was quite normal. Of course, now I'm mainly seeing patients that are struggling a lot in the menopause transition, so that's not really surprising. But most of us have been under chronic stress, right? Because that's
Yeah.
how our society is: do more, achieve more, very outcome oriented. So we're coming into a phase that requires a lot of us, and we're already depleted, and we haven't learned the tools to regulate ourselves, to get out of the stress response. So that stress response is automatic, but it's voluntary for us to get ourselves back into the rest and digest response that we have control over.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like you're
Well,
kind of
yeah,
nodding along there.
I am, because it relates that piece specifically, that it is automatic to go into the stress response, but voluntary and conscious to go into the rest and digest. That's such a massive piece of the work that I do, both on myself and with others. But tell us more about that and how that relates to menopause specifically.
Yeah, so imagine that you have a hot flash and that you notice this heat, right? And you have the ability to regulate yourself, to turn off that stress response. Or same person could be having the hot flash, and maybe they're in the middle of a meeting and they get red, and they're, oh my gosh, this is so embarrassing, look how red I'm getting. I need to be a leader in this role. Now we're keeping the stress response going, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we've missed an opportunity to get out of the stress response. And one way to do that is allowing what's here to be here. Like, it's when we resist things that really
Mm-hmm.
keeps us
Yeah.
holding on, right?
Yeah.
Whether that's our thoughts, we can get really attached to our thoughts, right? Like, we believe
Yeah.
them. Just because we think something, we think it's real. Most of it isn't true at all. And they're the same thoughts we had yesterday, and they're the same thoughts we had the day before, but we can get quite attached to them. So imagine the ability to get out of that stress response sooner, or even better, be resourced enough that we don't automatically go into the stress response so easily. That supports our adrenal glands. So now we can produce some of these hormones that helps us kind of, because really the neurological symptoms of menopause, the sleep, the hot flashes, energy changes, cognitive changes, mood changes, emotional changes, these are neurological. So our brain is used to a certain amount of estrogen. The receptors in the brain like getting that amount of estrogen. And there's other hormones, but just to talk about estrogen. And some of us are more sensitive to those changes that are happening, and we just need a little more time to adapt. Right? So
Mhm.
if our adrenals can produce a little bit of that estrogen for us, it gives us enough time to adapt to those changes.
So, in the end of season 2 of my podcast, I had someone come on who was a cycle syncing expert. And she has a system where you basically obviously I can't do it justice to explain it. So go listen to the episode if you want to know more. But what I've done so far with what she suggested was actually plugged my whole cycle into my work calendar, and I block off certain times of the month that are going to be like near or around my bleed. She breaks it up into 5 sections. So there's like accelerate, planning, connect, rest, and reset. Something, I might be getting those words slightly off, but you get the idea. And the concept is that during different hormonal phases, because we're not on a 24-hour hormonal cycle the way a man is, right? So during different hormonal phases, we're going to have different, bursts of energy where we can be a little bit more creative, or we're going to be a little bit more clear headed where we can connect with people and have like a really clear and engaging conversation. Or we're going to have times where maybe we just need to retreat a little bit, or at the very least be aware that we might not be at our best, right? And so I found that a very interesting process, and I share more in that episode around how like I went from really severe pain with endometriosis to being able to manage my cycle like almost just like breeze through it, like no problem, like almost not even notice, just through connecting with my body in a different way and honoring that cyclical nature in a different way, like really really changed things for me. So, what I'm wondering is, once you're going into perimenopause and menopause and postmenopause, your bleed is going to change and your hormones change. So, would you say that we still have that cyclical nature throughout the month where things are kind of shifting and we might have a trackable way to decipher, when might be a good time for me to rest, when might be a good time for me to like show up in public, or put, have a podcast episode be on a screen, that sort of thing? Or does that change as well?
Mm. Well, thank you for sharing that experience. It's definitely something I want to check out more about, to hear that you had such a transformative experience with that. Um, on with perimenopause, the hormones are changing. It depends on what, perimenopause lasts for at least 15 years for some people. So first we notice a decline in progesterone, and that is somewhat reliable, but then we go through this phase where estrogen is up and down, and unfortunately it's not as reliable. And this is what can make it so frustrating for women, is like, like if when I was having regular cycles, I knew that it was just like, okay, it's 3 days, maybe I can get through the 3 days. And now it's like 3 days here and 2 days later it comes back, and it's not as reliable. But I think the takeaway is listening to your body.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's a little bit less predictable in that way. So, one word that I keep hearing you bring up is like really the need for support, and often you're referring to like community-based support. I know that you have mentioned in the past in some of our private conversations that women often don't say yes to community-based supports when they need it. So what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, I think many women aren't aware of supports that might be available to them. Like your family doctor likely may not be pointing out a support for you because they're not aware of them. So
Mhm.
that's part of it. Part of it is this belief that I have to do everything. So the idea of relying on someone else doesn't even cross our mind. But so I just don't think we take advantage of these things. Like we are so great at, I one exercise I tell people to do is just take a piece of paper, a line down the middle. What did you do today that was truly for yourself? And what did you do for others? Whether it was how you spend your time, your money, your skills, your talents. Like most of us, the majority of our day is for other people.
Mhm.
So the idea of focusing on ourselves or investing in ourselves or spending time on ourselves, right? I mean, I can't tell you how often, people say, no, I can't do a breathwork practice for 5 minutes. And that is my signal that, oh, there's some deeper work that needs to be done here, right?
Mhm.
But just how common this is to put ourselves at the bottom of the list. And so the self compassion piece can be really helpful in terms of that reminder. What would you say to your daughter, your sister, your best friend in this situation? What would you say to them? These everyday practices, right? It's something that we're doing anyways. Eating, every time we get up out of the chair, every time we get into the car, like just noticing. And even if we are interrupted, notice how you react when you're interrupted, right?
Yeah.
Because we can get interrupted. That's a really good clue as to our capacity. Am I like, oh, I got interrupted again? Or am I able to respond in this situation? That's just more information about how our capacity is.
Oh, yeah. Well, I love what you say about community support because that's what I notice as well is that when you have safe spaces that you can show up in, that you can be your authentic self in, that you can start to share, here's how things are showing up for me, here's the symptoms I'm experiencing, you know, I got in a big fight with my partner last night and here's what's really getting to me. These different pieces, you have the opportunity to not only be witnessed and in a really
Mm.
honoring and respectful way in your own journey and in what you're experiencing. You also have the opportunity to have this mirrored back to you, various aspects reflected back, and to connect with other people who are likely experiencing the same things. Because guess what? Like, we are all unique, we are all individual, but we experience frequently very similar or overlapping situations and sensations and shame and guilt and fears and self-limiting beliefs and thoughts of being not good enough. All of these things are aspects that once you enter a community space and you gain the courage to actually show up in that community space, so to communicate with other members, to ask questions, to, let yourself be a little bit vulnerable, which can feel so icky and hard at the beginning, to be met with this mirroring and reflecting back to you and to be witnessed. It's such a healing experience. And to be met with, like, hey, me too, you
That
know?
can be powerful in and of itself, is just
Yeah.
hearing, oh, someone else is going through this.
Yeah. I don't believe we heal in isolation. I believe that we heal in community. And in our society today, we we often lack that sense of community where we can show up as our authentic selves, because there's all of this performative nature where, you know, many of us don't even know our neighbors. And when we are out in the community, we're filled with all of these expectations and beliefs about how it's okay to show up, and what's appropriate and what's not. And most people who ask you how you are, like, they don't really want the answer,
It's
right?
a great practice place in terms of learning communication too, because it's so intentional. Like even it's, if it's set up and the container is set up, it's a very intentional space. There's group agreements about how we're going to interact with each other. We're going to be listening mindfully. Most of us spend our time thinking about what we're going to say next, that we're not even listening to what the other
Mm-hmm.
person is saying. So I've always
Mm-hmm.
found working in groups to be quite educational, actually. Like, oh, is this how people can communicate? It was not something that I grew up with.
Yeah,
So I love how you're sharing that piece. And that's the evidence now, is that, being in community is such an important piece for building resilience.
absolutely. I don't have to like
Mhm.
translate my soul. Is that your experience as well? Because I know that community-based support is a big thing for you.
I've I found it important because anything that's been transformative in my life has been done in a community, like a small group. And I've always learned, you learn from the teacher, the mentor, but you always learn from other people in the group, sometimes more than from the mentor or the teacher. We can learn so much from one another.
I have a question from one of my community members. Is that okay if I bring that in?
Yeah, beautiful.
So they're actually in the postmenopausal stage. So we'll see if you have, something to offer them or to reflect back to them. But what they've written in was, I've had my last period in 2008, so I'm in my postmenopausal stage. How do I address a serious decline in libido? Is there still hope for me to do so? My partner, who is 12 years older than me, had some decline, but not as serious as mine. So I'm wanting to know how I can pick it up again. I'm on Vagifem 10, which my doctor prescribed for me for the rest of my life, but I'm not sure that this is working. I bought myself a Kiwi pelvic floor massager to help me relax, but I can't even seem to want to pick it up. Thanks for your advice in advance. And so, first, I want to really honor our guest in their vulnerability in asking this question, and also in being willing to share some of these more details with us so that we can assist them further. But I'd love to hear your thoughts, Sharon.
Yeah, thank you. And yes, thank you for the question. And very common too. A few thoughts kind of came to mind, and glad that you have that vaginal, localized support, which is important. So, and it's interesting because I'm just reflecting that the first place I'm going to is HRT. But I have two offerings. One is that, there are risks and benefits to hormone therapy. And when we talk about menopausal hormone therapy, we're talking about estrogen and progesterone. But DHEA it gets converted into estrogen, and it also gets converted into testosterone. So, mindfulness meditation can help build our DHEA levels, which converts to testosterone. Strength training also builds our testosterone. There are natural supplements that build your testosterone. And most women, even if you are 10, 20, 30 years post menopause, I would say most women could still consider a conversation around DHEA and testosterone. With that said, it's not necessarily low testosterone, right? It's often, there's a lot of there's one book in particular by Lori Brotto. It's called Better Sex with Mindfulness. And it's just around this um, actually being present for sensation. Because often we're not comfortable in our bodies, perhaps, or we're too busy in our minds to even get into our bodies. So that can be a mindfulness practice. And she has a workbook, which I quite like as well, that could be something that you consider. But there's a lot of, all the studies until more recently are around men's arousal, and women's arousal is very different. So often, we're not aroused at the beginning. We actually have to start something and then the arousal slowly builds. So sometimes mindfulness can just help us have more interest. Like you say, I don't even want to pick up this pelvic floor massager. I know a lot of women, they'll work with pelvic floor therapists and they'll suggest like dilator kits, for instance. But most women never use them. You're like, no, I'm not interested. I don't want to use these. So, they could be low testosterone, which can be addressed with strength training, mindfulness, and meditation, anything that's regulating our nervous system. So that's something that you could explore. And certainly the actual nervous system regulation, and actually being able to be present for sensation. So starting with, what do I find pleasurable? And it doesn't necessarily have to be in regards to intimacy, but getting back in touch with what brings you joy. What do you find pleasurable? Is it sound? Is there certain sounds? Are there certain places that maybe you really like nature, you like to be near water? We can get so busy with life and our responsibilities that we just forget to tune in to what actually brings us pleasure. So I
Mhm.
hope that's a little bit helpful as a starting point.
It is. Thank you, Sharon. It brings in a lot of how I would work with um this guest or with somebody, somebody presenting with these types of circumstances. I'm not a medical professional. I don't go into the hormonal side of things, so I appreciate you bringing in the hormonal side and having that discussion a little bit. Do you ever notice that there are a lot of other layers, like potentially a deep freeze response in the nervous system, right? Like if you're in functional freeze for a prolonged amount of time, or fight flight for a prolonged amount of time, you do start to lose that connection to sensation and to your body. Additionally, we have, most women, I don't know if I should say most, but many, many women have experienced some form of assault or trauma, or somebody doing something to their body that they did not consent to in some way. And then that also creates this, internalized stress response that maybe has not completed, that is still existing in our system. And again, disconnects us from that pelvic area. The pelvic area is this source of safety and creation. And like energetically, you're looking at safety, security, foundations, creation. And if you're not feeling safe, secure, connected, then again, it doesn't seem like a disorder to me to not be feeling super into it. You know, that to me
Mhm.
seems like a very normal response from our bodies to say, hey, I'm not feeling connected.
Thank you. Yes, I
Yeah.
love that you brought in the nervous system piece. And even in terms of hormones, we had two foundations are we have to be able to process the hormones. So our gut, our liver has to be working optimally to be able to process our hormones. And we need the nervous system support behind it. So if you're finding that hormones aren't working for you, that could be a reason that there is, underlying dysregulation there, or you're requiring some more support with metabolically processing the hormones.
What are the tools that you find most effective or most supportive for women who want to start to explore menopause through a nervous system lens?
Mhm. Well, I mean, there's lots of different practitioners. Obviously, you have so many tools, Denise. My tools are mainly around mindfulness. That's my way. That's my route in because it's the basis for most of the other tools. If we need to be able to know what's happening in our body to even know if something's working for us, is it not working for us? Getting reconnected with ourselves, that awareness piece. So, can we become aware of beliefs that we have? Are they self limiting? Can we become aware of these automatic ways of coping and know, do they still serve in this particular moment? All of this requires some awareness. And if we're talking about insight meditation, self kindness is part of that practice. And so we're also developing the self compassion piece. Yeah, so
Hmm.
that's my main tool. And then in terms of actual, regulation, if we find ourselves in the stress response, how we can, get back into that rest and digest response. We talk about breath work, we talk about, how, like I have lots of smaller tools. Like it just depends what's coming up, right? Is it something that it's more valuable to hum or use cold water on your face? Or, but we have to be mindful to even use those tools to begin with. We have to know, oh, I'm in the stress response right now,
Hmm.
right? Do I want this to complete? Can I stay with this? Do I have the capacity to allow this to complete? Or is it time to regulate myself? And how do we ground ourselves? It's different for everyone, right? Some people find their breath really grounding. Some people find a place in the body grounding. For some, it's sound. So, giving ourselves enough time to work with these tools, to really integrate them so that we can use them when we need them.
I love what you just highlighted between the difference of, do I have the space and capacity to allow this stress response to complete in my system right now, or do I need to regulate? The way that you just said
Mhm.
it, so many people think of regulation as, you know, bypassing the stress response.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you for pointing that out. Yeah. And I guess in my mind, it's more about um, getting ourselves out of the stress response if we're not able to complete the stress response, because it's going to be different every day. We don't always have the
Exactly.
capacity to do that, right? A
Yeah,
lot of the time, we don't
exactly.
have the capacity. It's not the right timing. We don't want
Yeah,
to be with it. It's too overwhelming. So, forcing ourselves is not the answer. Sometimes, the goal is to eventually learn to be with what shows up in life as best we can, but to also
exactly.
hold that kindness at the same time.
I view the ability to regulate as sort of blending those two things. So, like you said, noticing, oh, I've hit a stress response, or I've, might be leaving my window of tolerance. Do I have the capacity and space right now to be with this, to allow this to metabolize through my system? Or do I need to bring in outside practices to bring myself back down because I don't have, and to downregulate my nervous system because I don't have the capacity to be with what's here right now? And that ability to be present with that and to make the conscious choice and then to regulate in whatever way that looks like for you in that time is, to me, not about, showing up more appropriately in society or making ourselves smaller or not experiencing or expressing the rightful emotions that we might have in responses to the atrocities happening all around us every day right now, but actually brings back in agency and autonomy. Because now like we respond and react to the world and to the people in our lives and to scenarios and to ourselves directly from the nervous system state that we are in at that time. So if we can downregulate or recognize that we have upregulated, be with that, allow it to complete, we give ourselves back that agency in our conscious choice, in how we respond to the world and how we move through the world, instead of just reacting automatically from this stress response. And often that is when we act in ways that we're not so proud of. And we have to deal with that too, right?
Yeah. And, I think this is you're reminding me of my definition of self-care is knowing what is called for in the moment. Like for you, what is called for right now? To me, that's true self-care.
I love that. I love that definition. Yeah, thank you for that. One of the things that you mentioned in one of our conversations that I really wanted to make sure I didn't forget to bring in today was that we can, the way that you had worded it was something along the lines of like a lot of the conversation these days is around burnout and already being in burnout. But you mentioned, what if we noticed the signs that we are moving into burnout instead of waiting until we were already there?
Yeah, we often wait until we're just incapacitated, right? We can't function and the nervous system just shuts down completely. But what if we could tune in, like you mentioned earlier, several times a day and know what is my capacity, right? So the signs of like high cortisol, the restlessness, agitation, difficulty concentrating, perhaps anxious thoughts, like, this stress response. But if chronic stress persists, then we end up a bit more dysregulated. When we want our cortisol to give us energy during the day, we're tired, and then we're wired at night. We're waking up at 2 o'clock in the morning because our cortisol's high and it's meant to be lower in the evening. Right. And then if that
Mhm.
persists, then we end up in low cortisol or burnout or what used to be called adrenal fatigue. Right. So, can we start to notice when we're in the stress response and have those tools to either be with it or to downregulate
Mhm.
so that we don't land in the burnout? It's such a
Mhm.
shame that so many of us land in burnout. And it's not just, mental emotional stress, although, these internal stressors tend to be more chronic for people. But it could be inflammation in the body, right? There's lots of things that are out of our control, right?
Yeah.
And illness,
Yeah.
right? Just another sign. Okay, maybe I need to nourish myself more than the person beside me. So what? Right?
Or
We're
differently.
all personal. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. What would be the signs, like the first signs that somebody is heading into that burnout state, like that somebody would really want to watch for and pick up on those cues? Like you mentioned, being kind of wired at night. I often think of that tired but wired sensation. And,
Hmm.
when you're feeling that tired but wired on a regular basis, like that's a big red flag for me. Um,
Yeah.
what are the things that you would tell somebody else who is maybe like
Hmm.
really new to all of this, right? And so that they could start to pick it up in their own system.
Right. So I would pay probably, more attention to any of the high cortisol, because that's even earlier. That's even earlier than the dysregulated. So, how do you notice the stress response in your own body? Is it heat? Is it anxious thoughts, ruminating thoughts? Is it like any of these are all signs that, oh, okay, we know, like, yeah, this is out of my comfort zone. I'm either into my stretch zone or maybe I'm even into the overwhelm zone. But it could be, it's really so dependent on people. I know for myself, when I start noticing I'm forgetting words, that's a big sign for me. I'm like, okay, you're doing too much. This is yeah.
Hmm.
So it's really different for different people, right? Because we're all going to hold stress differently. For some of us, it's going to be not sleeping. For some of us, it's, yeah, the wired and tired. For me, the wired and tired was past, like it was really close to burnout with the wired and tired. I
Yeah.
would have preferred to see it much earlier than the wired and
Yeah.
tired. So how soon can we notice it? Can we notice it when it's happening in the moment? Be like,
Hmm.
there's the stress response. And
Hmm.
is this something that I can allow to complete? Do I have the capacity to do that right now? Um,
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Thank
very
you.
individual.
Yeah. And now, what about like entering perimenopause? There's a lot of conversations that I'm seeing around people who they know something's off in their body. They know, things are starting to change. They don't feel like themselves. Maybe they don't feel like they recognize themselves anymore. And they go to the doctor and they start having the conversation around perimenopause, and they're often told that they're too young, that they're too young to be experiencing that. What would what would your response to that be? But even further, what would you say the very early signs of perimenopause are, and how would somebody begin to decipher that for themselves?
Just because you're having symptoms doesn't mean there's a problem or that you're going through early menopause. These are natural changes to progesterone, but it should be investigated.
And what would be some of the more physical changes that somebody might notice really early on, if any?
So
Okay.
it's so important that we're working on these pieces. We're developing that self-awareness, but also we have the tools. We
And
kind of
that's where
circles back to our beginning of our conversation
that's what I was just
around,
gonna say.
yeah, that
To
it
clarify what you're saying about really having those supported adrenals, correct me if I'm wrong, you're saying we need to really be bringing in that nervous system support.
yeah, I mean, there's supplements that can support the adrenals. When we take hormone therapy, it supports the adrenals because now the adrenals don't have to do as much to produce those hormones. We can reduce caffeine and we can make sure we're eating protein and we're not eating sugar and we're limiting inflammation. We can do all those things. But imagine you have some underlying stress that you're in every single day, like wanting to control everything, right?
Yeah.
And that is keeping you in the stress response all day long. You're truly just playing catch up with all the other things if you were in the stress response all day long because
Hmm.
of something you believe, right?
Yeah.
Something you've carried with you. So I'm pretty passionate that it's just some of the really important work. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
There are some conventional and certainly alternative functional practitioners too that support people with this, but often that's not where it's going to come either. It's going to be
Hmm.
people finding, people like you that do this work and specialize in this work,
And people like you.
and
And
people
so,
like
on
me.
that note, before we wrap up, I understand that you have a signature program, a 90-day nervous system reset program. Do you want to tell us, like, what are you most proud of with that program? What do you want listeners to know about it? And then we'll make sure that people know how to find you as well.
Sure. So what do I want to share that I'm most proud of? Probably what I'm most proud of is the work that I've done personally to be able to bring this to other people, but also, we actually fill out scales or like questionnaires in the beginning so that we can track improvements, and we fill those out at the end too. So we can track improvements to our sleep, our emotional reactivity, our stress resilience, our cognition. So some people like having that data, things really have improved. But I love that it's a group program. I love that we have 3 months together, which gives us enough time to start integrating those tools, but we start using them right away in your everyday life.
Mhm.
So those are some things I'm really proud of. Yeah, you can find it. You can find information. You can always reach out to me, but my website is my name. So it's SharonPendlington.com.
Yeah, I'll link it to in the show notes as well
Sure.
for people for easy access as well.
Sure.
Sharon, thank you so much for being here. Before we close, is there anything that you just want to leave the listeners with today, or anything that you feel like we missed that you just really want people to hear or to know about?
We covered so much. So there's
Hmm.
nothing really calling to me other than perhaps to set, an intention. Like, what can you put in your calendar for 5 minutes,
Yeah.
5 minutes today? Or can I tune into myself just, before each meal, for instance? Or, yeah, when I'm using the bathroom, like, how can we take these small steps to start to know ourselves more clearly? And I mean, I do
Hmm.
have a perimenopause archetype quiz, which will help you start to understand your menopause symptoms. So you can check that out as well if that would be supportive.
Yeah, wonderful. I will link that too. As long as I don't run into character count issues, I will link it. Sometimes I
So much
do
to think
run
about.
into character count challenges. But
Mhm.
thank you, Sharon, so much for being here. And thank you so much for that, guiding us through that beautiful embodiment practice early on in the session today in the conversation. And thank you again for just bringing such a honoring lens and such a reverence to this conversation around menopause and how the menopause transition can be a time of empowerment.
My pleasure. And I really appreciated your perspective and your thoughts on a few things. I learned quite a lot today, Denise.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. As always, I am trusting you to take what resonates with you and leave the rest behind. Full extended versions of many of my episodes for season 3 can be found in the Embodied Soul with Denise Elysa community app. If you'd like to join our recordings live and have the opportunity to send in questions in advance, that's the place to do it. If my podcast resonates with you, it would mean the world to me if you'd leave me a rating, review, positive comments, or likes, as those are so important on these platforms, and be sure to hit subscribe. If you'd like to dive deeper than what these platforms can provide, I invite you to explore my Embodied Soul with Denise Elysa community app, a virtual sanctuary where you can connect more deeply with yourself and others in a supportive environment while developing the tools to awaken your own self-healer. You are the medicine.